I'm Mary West on the Voice of the Foothills, AM 950 KAHI. Gary Noy is the author of the upcoming book Untangled Shadows, Tales of the Sierra Nevada. Mr. Noy will be lecturing for the Sierra College Friends of the Library at the Sierra College Press on Wednesday, April 10th, 2013. The lecture will be in the boardroom, first floor of the Rockland Campus Library. Historian and author Gary Noy will present little-known and unusual stories about fascinating people and events in Sierra Nevada history from his upcoming book, Untangled Shadows, Tales of the Sierra Nevada. Mr. Noy took time out to talk with us at KAHI Radio about a couple of those little-known and unusual stories.
The premise of the book is to examine some of the little-known stories that have kind of been lost in the shadows of Sierra history, and that, when everyone thinks of the Sierra, they think of John Muir and Yosemite Valley and the Donner Party or something, major like that. But I'm dealing with people that probably no one's ever heard of, like Moses Schallenberger and Melissa Koray, and people who played interesting and important roles in Sierra Nevada history that just haven't got the spotlight shined on them.
Well, I was born and raised here. I just love this area, and so many people do, and there is so much history. Can you share part of one of those folks, a little story about why we should take a little closer look?
The story that's really interesting is the story of Melissa Koray. And she was, back at the time of the Mexican War, back in the 1840s, she was part of what was called the Mormon Battalion. And it was a very unique military unit. It was the only religiously based military unit in American history. And it came out here to California from Utah, all volunteers, to participate in the Mexican War. And at the end of the war, a group of members of the Mormon Battalion decided to get a wagon train and go back to Utah. And Melissa Koray was the only woman who was involved in that, going back east. It was the only major wagon train that went from west to east during the California Gold Rush period. And they traveled on a road that's, if you go out of Highway 50 today up near Sly Park, there's a road called Mormon Emigrant Trail. And a lot of people take that road. It takes you to Kirkwood, ultimately. And she was involved in that. She was kind of the cook and kind of the morale booster for all of the men. And it was a remarkable story. A drive that takes perhaps half an hour today took them weeks to participate in and to carve this trail. And it was really a very, very dramatic story. And she was only in her early 20s at the time this took place. And I think it's, one of the kind of remarkable hidden stories of the time period.
And so how did you find out about her? How did you find, if they're little-known stories, there's probably little known about them. So how do you dig in there and find these folks?
Well, it's kind of related to my career. I taught history at Sierra College for over 20 years, and I ran the Center for Sierra Nevada Studies at the college for 10 years. And I just became fascinated in the Sierra. I was born in Grass Valley, so I'm a Sierra boy. And as I started to dig into the famous stories, the John Muirs and the others, these other stories kind of popped up. And I started to collect them for years and years and years, and I ultimately ended up with well over 100 of these little hidden stories. And so I put them together and sent them off to a publisher, Heyday Books in Berkeley. And we're going to publish a collection of about 60 of them that's going to be coming out next year. And so I'm just fascinated by it. I grew up in Grass Valley just around the corner from a little street called Kate Hayes Street that I had no idea who Kate Hayes was until I grew up, and then I found out she was a major entertainer during the California Gold Rush, great operatic diva. And if you go all over the gold country, there are Kate Hayes mines and hills and roads and all over the place that I never would have thought of unless I had encountered this personally as a kid growing up in Grass Valley.
You mentioned the Mormon Immigrant Trail. You mentioned Kate Hayes Street. Are there landmarks to go along with a lot of these stories in the book?
Oh, sure. There's one actually in Auburn that I think is just fascinating. It's the only place, I think, in the American West in which you have the conjunction of the four major themes of American Western history. You have the Transcontinental Railroad, you have the Western Expansion, you have the Gold Rush, and you have Lewis and Clark. And they all come together in Auburn in the form of one person who was called Pompey. And he was Sacagawea's son during the Lewis and Clark expedition. He was born during a very famous little kid. And he ultimately came to Auburn in its earliest days, became a resident for almost 20 years. His actual name was Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau, and he was known as Pompey by Lewis and Clark. And he lived here in Auburn. He was a miner here, and very few people know that Lewis, Sacagawea's son, lived and worked in Auburn, in Old Town. And if you go to Old Town today by the old Victorian firehouse, under a tree there is a little monument to Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau that mentions his connection with Lewis and Clark and all of these early threads of American Western history. Those are the kind of things that I find fascinating. And you're exactly right. If you go throughout the Gold Country, the Sierra, you can find these little spots. And what I'm trying to do in my book is to shine a spotlight on these and to bring them more into public knowledge.
Is the book going to have directions, at least landmarks?
Well, I think if you read it, you'll be able to determine where they are. And, we're still negotiating, I think, is probably the best word, as to whether we're going to have a map and those kind of directions. But I think from the writing, hopefully I write it well enough that people can identify where everything is.
And so the book doesn't come out until 2014. We have to wait.
Part of the wait period is we've identified 60 very unique photographs that illustrate this book, too. And we have to go find where they are and get permission and all of that kind of thing. And just the book production process takes a while, too. But this has been in the works now for a couple of years, and it's going to finally come to fruition come January of next year.
Well, congratulations. How long have you been working on the book personally?
Oh, gosh. I've been collecting these stories, I'm guessing, for 20 years. Wow. And I just had them in a notebook, and I took it to the publisher we've had a great relationship with here at Sierra College, and I said, "Is there a book in this?" And he said, I think so. Putting in the stories together has been a couple of years now that I've been working on it, and we're getting into the stretch run for it now.
The book is called Untangled Shadows, Tales of the Sierra Nevada by Gary Noy. He'll be speaking about the book on April 10th at the Sierra College Rockland campus. And the book's due out in 2014. I'm Mary West on the Voice of the Foothills, AM 950 KAHI.